Joining me right now is the AFPI Senior Fellow, the Chairman of the China Policy Initiative, Steve Yates. He's CEO at DC International Advisory and former Deputy National Security Advisor for Dick Cheney. Steve, thanks very much for being here. Assess the situation for us as far as the way you see it.
Well, as we have the National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, going to Rome, it's just about a year ago on March 18th that he and Secretary Blinken met last with Tiger Yang, the senior Chinese foreign policy expert. That was their first taste of what is usually called China's wolf warrior treatment, where they somewhat barked at Americans about our human rights problems inside the United States as a way to push back against any kind of emphasis on human rights issues with regard to China, from Hong Kong to the Uyghurs, etc., as they went into the Olympics. We now have that 1 year of experience. It's not really clear that the United States made any headway on those issues with China. We have former Secretary Kerry, who had pushed the climate agenda, seemingly not relevant to recent policy conversations. But I think most disturbingly, we have the failure of deterrence in Europe with regard to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, all the more urgent to bolster the deterrent factor in Asia. Very mixed or unclear signals from the administration how they would do that.
Yeah, it's a great analysis, Steve, and that is the issue, isn't it? I mean, there are many people who criticize the response to the Russian aggression because for weeks, President Biden was saying things like, if he invades, then we'll do this. If he does that, then we'll do that. We all knew what was coming. Now China is warning that any country who supports Taiwan militarily will face, quote, the worst consequences of all. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just got back from Taiwan this week, and he joined me yesterday on Sunday Morning Future on what he has to say on China potentially invading Taiwan. Watch this.
Xi Jinping is determined. He's made clear his intention to, quote, reunify, end of quote, with Taiwan. What tools, what tactics, what timing is difficult to know. I only know this. It is not predetermined that he'll be successful at that. He'll be successful at that if we're scared. If we think that taking action to support the Taiwanese people is provocative to Xi Jinping, it's not. This is an independent nation. They know it. The world knows it. We ought to behave as such, and we ought to provide them the tools they need to maintain their own sovereignty.
So what about that, Steve? Would you advise supporting Taiwan in the way that you would want Ukraine supported, potentially before an invasion from China?
Absolutely, and actually in spades, because this is a territory on which the global economy depends much, much more than it does on that of Ukraine. However we feel about the plight of the Ukrainian people, and surely they're enduring terrible hardship, there are much bigger consequences to a Chinese attack on Taiwan than just the humanitarian ones, which are severe. So whether it comes from chips to software to a whole host of different industries, Taiwan is a big part of the global economy. But beyond that, I agree completely with what Secretary Pompeo is saying. We don't get to know when or how the Chinese leadership will move. The first thing that Jake Sullivan can do on the behalf of the United States is stop giving China freebies on making these kinds of threats. They're the revisionist power in this, and we'd better come up with a serious way of showing that we're going to stand by the people of Taiwan. And when we look at what happened to Ukraine, we pulled back from defense assistance prior to invasion so as not to provoke. We need to be doing the opposite with Taiwan to the extent their elected leadership is ready to move.
Yeah, instead, Steve, the U.S. administration, the Biden administration, just canceled the China initiative. We're no longer investigating the intellectual property theft from the DOJ.
Yeah, that was an outrage. That basically proves the Chinese counterpart as being correct, trying to use woke language against the United States. And then what does the United States do? It uses a woke logic to pull back on a real national security threat. The Communist Party of China is not an ethnicity. They can't use racism as a defense. And stealing technology is not something that Chinese people do. It's what the CCP does.
Yeah, that's right. Steve, it's great to see you. Thanks very much. Steve Yates, spot on as usual. We'll be right back. Stay with us.